The 1910s were coming to a close, and the film industry had completely changed. While the practice of film production began in the 1870s, the following 50 years saw the medium as something to scoff at, another trend that would pass with time. But as we get into the early 1900s, people began to read the writing on the wall. Film was here to stay. Prior to the 1900s, films were mostly simple recordings of everyday life, called actuality films. These were mostly shown off at carnivals, in big pop-up tents with a projector at the back. But with the 1900s, film became a lot more. Permanent movie theaters began to pop up, and studios got bold, investing more and more into their projects. With the rise of film as an art form, also came the rise of stardom. At first, actors in movies weren't credited. No one cared about the people on the screen, they were there to see the screen itself. This is an idea that was about to change forever. Actors got their credits, and soon, people were going to the theater to see Mary Pickford, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, and of course, Theda Bara. Bara was one of the most famous silent film actresses, made popular by both her talent and her beauty, rising as perhaps the earliest sex symbol of Hollywood. By the time her career came to an end, she had starred in 43 films in just 8 years, making her one of the busiest and best well-paid actresses. Even with such an impressive career behind her, there is one film in particular that made Theda Bara a living legend: Cleopatra. Cleopatra was a film released in 1917, and it is the perfect example of how film was changing. For one, production. The movie had the largest budget of any film at the time, leading to its impressive success. Also, the production company made sure the press knew Theda Bara was in this movie. Her name was everywhere, and a handful of embellishing stories were released about the star, all for the singular goal of filling theater seats. And did it work? Yes. Cleopatra had the largest box office take of 1917, furthering the already successful career of Bara. However, despite the incredible success and gravitas around Cleopatra, we cannot see the film today. What remains is segments, pieces of the pie that amount to a taste of the film. There is a ton to discuss about Cleopatra, from the interesting history of the lead actress, to the intrepid production, to its eventual loss and partial rediscovery. Join me as we take a deep dive into Cleopatra, the most expensive lost silent film. Before we begin a discussion of Cleopatra the film, we should first discuss the actress who is set to play her. Born on July 29, 1885, in Cincinnati, Ohio, Theda Bara was born Theodosia Burr Goodman. She was actually named after former United States Vice President Aaron Burr's daughter, Theodosia Burr, who infamously disappeared without a trace, being lost at sea. Not sure why you'd name your oldest daughter after someone like that, but she was. Theodosia was the oldest of 3 children. She had a brother named Marquis and a sister named Esther. The 3 were raised by their parents, Bernard Goodman and Pauline Louise Francois, immigrants from Poland and Switzerland, respectively. The 2 married in 1882 and had Theodosia 3 years later. Now living in the Cincinnati suburb of Avondale, the Goodmans lived a mostly normal and quiet life. Theodosia attended the Walnut Hills High School, where she would graduate from in 1903, then seeking a higher education at the University of Cincinnati. She attended classes here for 2 years before she dropped out to pursue her real passion: acting. In her younger years, Theodosia gained an early affinity for performing. She would recite plays and sing for her friends and family. From here, she decided this is what she wanted to do with her life. After performing in a few local theaters in Ohio, she moved to New York City. This was in 1908, which, at this point in history, film production was centered both here and over in New Jersey. Films would be made in New Jersey due to the state's better natural lighting. to which they would be screened in New York City, who had the theaters built to show them off. But now in New York City, Theodosia didn't start off behind a screen. She went back up on the stage. She was able to debut on Broadway on August 18, 1908, performing in a play called The Devil. Theodosia played the role of Madame Scheshwig, which consisted of a small spoken dialogue. This is what life looked like for the next 3 years. Small roles and small productions. Not satisfied with her work, Theodosia looked towards film. She passed her name around the casting calls, often lying about her age. At about this point, she was in her mid to late 20s, not very desirable to the film producers. Instead, she would list her age at 22, 24, anything young 20s. This worked in her favor, as she was able to break into film, gaining her first on-screen role in a 1914 movie called The Stain, a role that would change her life forever. Even though her role in The Stain was small, it didn't go unnoticed. The director of the film, Frank Powell, loved her performance. He passed her name up the ladder to his boss, William Fox. Fox was a newcomer to the film industry, but he was about to completely change it. First entering the world of movies in 1904, he bought a theater in Brooklyn, investing his profits across more theaters in the city. Fox cared more about the business and less about the art of film. So at first, he was only dealing in distribution, buying films from other production companies to show off at his theaters. However, this venue was successful, so Fox did expand into production, leasing space in Fort Lee, New Jersey, which, again, at this point, was Hollywood. Way before Hollywood was a thing. Now with a studio, William Fox began his own productions, and part of this process included finding stars to be in his movies. His next movie was an adaptation of a poem, and it required a beautiful woman for the lead. Well, it just so happens that one of his directors, Frank Powell, is making a movie called The Stain, which had a brief appearance from a beautiful woman, Theodosia Goodman. Powell passes her name up to William, and he is enamored by her, deciding almost immediately that she was his star now. It should be noted that at this point, Theodosia was almost 30. And again, that's not what she told William Fox. She lied about her age, claiming to be in her early 20s once again, and she still had the looks to pull it off. So with his lead, production began on the film at Fort Lee, adapting the 1909 Broadway play A Fool There Was. This was a film about a rich investment banker who travels to England alone, leaving behind a wife and daughter. On this trip, he meets a vampire woman, a psychic who takes over his mind, forcing him into a life of servitude. He abandons his wife, his job, all social standing to serve the seductress. This film was made in 1915, by the way. This was a big deal, as films at this point never really saw the villain winning. It's even said that the man hears his cries and pleas from his family urging his return to them, of which he ignores. Also, the vampire faces no repercussions. Through and through, she gets what she wants. Of course, this had a very controversial release, with one of the interstitial stills being singled out as a highlight. "Kiss me, my fool," which became a slogan for early Hollywood. Even with the controversy, the film was a massive success, and a lot of the press all focused on the lead actress, Theda Bara, or as you've known her up to this point, Theodosia Goodman. Yes, she changed her name prior to the film's release. Fox himself suggested the name change. Theda was a shortened version of Theodosia and was a childhood nickname. And Bara came from her mom's father, Francois Barringer de Coppet, Bara, Theda Bara, the new star of Fox Studios. Also prior to the film's release, Fox published a fabricated story about Theda Bara. It was claimed that she was born in Egypt, raised there, right in the shadow of the Sphinx. Her parents were a royal king of Egypt and a famed actress from France, of which she soon moved to. In France, she became a sensation, and Fox watched one of her shows over there, bringing her back from Europe to star in his films. Keep in mind, she was actually born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. Much less fantastical. Regardless, this marketing lie worked, leading to a Fool There Was's incredible success, furthering the blossoming career of Theda Bara. Audiences were blown away by Theda's performance. Keep in mind, this was her first major film role, and audiences saw this beautiful woman with a mysterious background playing a femme fatale character. She seemed to have come from nowhere, and due to all of this, Theda Bara became an overnight success. After starring in 10 films in 1915 alone, Theda received hundreds of letters from desperate men begging to marry her. In all future interviews, Bara played into the strange character Fox had crafted. In her interviews, she would talk about the occult and mystic ideas, all in an attempt to preserve this mysterious image, and it worked. If we back up to A Fool There Was, Bara's official character title was The Vampire, leading to some claiming A Fool There Was to be the first ever vampire movie made. However, the word vampire is used metaphorically. She wasn't a literal vampire. Regardless if it was the first or not, the title of The Vampire, or The Vamp for short, would be something that followed Theda for her entire career. A career that soon took off. In 1915 alone, following A Fool There Was, Theda Bara starred in 9 additional movies, all playing a similar character. A femme fatale, a vamp. By the time her career was over, Theda starred in 43 films, all commercial successes. At the peak of her career, she was being paid $4,000 a week, a modern-day equivalent of $100,000 a week, or $5.2 million a year. But if we back up from Theda Bara, let's take a brief moment to discuss where we are in the world of film. The early 1910s saw Europe as the dominant and most central hub for film production, with America being a close second. However, in 1915, World War I broke out, hampering film production across the entire European continent, allowing America to dig their heels in as the dominant producer of film, something that remains true even today, over 100 years later. But if we stay 100 years ago, film production in America was centered in a few cities, most prominently, as we've mentioned, Fort Lee, New Jersey. But as we get further into the 1910s, film production headed west. Producers were attracted to the climate of Los Angeles, a year-round warm zone with plenty of natural lighting from the sun. So by the time 1917 came around, all the major film-producing companies were now based out of Hollywood land, including the Fox Film Company. William joined the trend of heading west, and he brought with him his newest, best well-known, and best-paid star. The woman on the screen was no longer Theodosia Goodman, the budding actress from Cincinnati, Ohio. No, she was completely left behind in Fort Lee. Now in Hollywood, she was the mystic, mysterious, man-eating vampire, Theda Bara. And another highlight of her career was right on the horizon. As we mentioned earlier, film production was shifting to California, and Fox Films was following this trend. In 1915, work on a studio out west began, and in 1917, it was finished. Now, Fox Studios had their very own spot in Hollywood where they could make the most grandiose pictures imaginable, and one was set to go into immediate production. Of course, we're talking about Cleopatra. This was a film planned to explore the life of the famous Egyptian queen, with a specific focus on the love triangle or angle between her, Mark Antony, and Julius Caesar, characters who would all play an important role in the film. The movie was based on a novel from 1889, written by H. Rider Haggard. It was also based on an 1890 play also titled Cleopatra, which in turn was based off a 1623 play called Antony and Cleopatra, which was written by William Shakespeare. The 1917 film would not be the first Cleopatra movie to be made. That title belongs to a film from 1910, a short film that is completely lost. However, a Cleopatra feature film was made in 1912, and it is completely found. But after a long history of plays, novels, and other films, it was now Theda Bara's turn to adapt the character for the big screen. William Fox had grand plans for his film. He was adapting a popular character using an even more popular actress. And this grandiose plan showed in both the production and the marketing leading up to the film. Fox wanted every step of the movie to be printed on the press. And the first major story involving Cleopatra, the room Theda Bara would be staying in. When she was moved to Hollywood, her bedroom was modeled with a stereotypical Egyptian mythical occult setup. Tapestries were draped from the walls, beaded curtains covered the windows, and, most shocking, a snake was kept in a cage. When reporters would come in to interview her, she would take the snake out and have it draped across her shoulders, allowing it to climb all over her as she talked about the movie. I also wouldn't be surprised if they had like fake sarcophaguses and like model pyramids in here as well. Again, just the first step in the long path of making Bara as Cleopatra a sensation. William Fox tapped a man named J. Gordon Edwards to direct Cleopatra. He had a bit of a history with the company, directing previous big spectacle films for Fox, many of which starred Theda Bara. So, he was the obvious choice for Fox's next big film. By the time the production for Cleopatra was over, the budget had reached an impressive $500,000. This is a modern-day equivalent of $13.7 million. A drop in the bucket compared to current film budgets, but back then, this was a big deal. If we discuss another massive film of the time, The Birth of a Nation, it only had a budget of $110,000, which was already crazy, but now Cleopatra had a budget 5 times as much as that, and this production money was definitely put to use. To start off, replicas of the pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx were constructed, alongside a model of Alexandria's waterfront. In addition, the film consisted of an incredible 15,000 extras, and a ton of boats were built for the movie's climax, a battle in the water. Despite all of these major production pieces, the largest chunk of the budget went to Bara herself. Sure, her salary as the lead actress was huge, but the most of her budget was spent on costumes. By the time the film was over, Bara went through 50 different costumes, all incredibly elaborate in design, and each one more revealing than the last. At some points, she was practically wearing nothing. Decisions all made by her. Bara actually held the record for the most costumes for a singular character in a movie, a record that was broken 46 years later in 1963. The record was broken by Elizabeth Taylor, who starred in, get this, 1963's Cleopatra, wearing 65 costumes throughout that production. Because of this, all eyes were on Theda during the entire production of Cleopatra, and both she and Fox knew this. So the stories about the star continued to get more wild with every headline. At first, Fox released a story about her name, claiming that Theda Bara was an anagram for Arab death. Theda herself pulled out an old trick of hers, lying about her age. This time, she lied about her star sign, claiming to be a Capricorn, the same sign the actual historic Cleopatra had. Instead, Theda was a Leo. A story about her perfume was also released, that a world's famous psychic perfumist had made her a unique scent to wear both on set and in interviews. According to Bara, the recipe was pages long and 2,000 years old. In a movie magazine of the time, it was reported that the fragrance was so strong, people in the audience may smell it through the screen. Something that probably should have been mentioned earlier, but Theda Bara didn't even have black hair. She was blonde, but she kept it dyed to preserve her mysterious image. Also, she was nearsighted, but she never wore glasses. fearing this would detract from her beauty. Consequently, on the set of Cleopatra, she had to memorize literally every stage placement and position of every actor at every moment as to not accidentally trip over or bump into someone. And perhaps most egregiously, Fox came up with this lie. When their producers were touring Egypt to more accurately build their sets, they uncovered an old, undiscovered tomb in the pyramids, where these words were found carved into the temple's wall. I, Ramses, priest of Set, tell you this. She shall seem a snake to most men. She shall lead them to sin and to their destruction. Yet, she shall not be so. She shall be good, and virtuous, and kind of heart. But she shall not seem so to most men. For she shall not be that which she appears. They didn't have all the stuttering in there. She shall be called Theda. It seems between that message, the perfume, and the star sign, Fox was trying to convey the message that Theda was the reincarnated form of the actual ancient Egyptian queen, Cleopatra. Of course, this worked. The press was in a frenzy to see this movie. But it's a sad fact to say that these weren't the only stories that put Theda Bara in the limelight. Tragedy would almost strike the set. One night, Theda was being driven back to her bedroom. The streets she had to take were narrow, built into a cliff face. It's here where a motorcyclist came speeding around the corner, and Theda's driver turned to the left to avoid him, to which the car went off of a cliff. It was dangling over a 1,000-foot drop, but luckily, the driver managed to get the car back on track, and Theda was safe. At first, Theda Bara laughed this off, but in later interviews, she talked about how the incident really shook her up, and how truly close to death she felt that night. Despite the almost tragedy, the expensive budget, and everything in between, Cleopatra had a smooth production, and it was ready to be shown to the adoring masses of fans whipped into a frenzy by the media. After about a year of elaborate set buildings, constant costume changes, and continuous lies in the press about the lead actress, perpetrated by the very studio employing her, Cleopatra debuted at the Lyric Theater in New York City on October 14, 1917. It was very well received. The film stats of the time reported that over 5 million people watched the film in just a year of its release. We have spent so much time discussing the background and production of the movie, we've barely discussed what the actual film was about. So let's fix that and do a brief plot summary. As we mentioned earlier, the film centers on the actual historic love triangle or angle of Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and Mark Antony, all major characters in the film. Caesar and Cleopatra first plot to rule the world together, to which he loses his life soon after. Following this, a high priest of Egypt, Pharaoh, is set to assassinate the Egyptian queen, but he instead falls in love with her. Pharaoh then helps Cleopatra discover a tomb where she gets riches, to which she funds a trip to Europe to meet Mark Antony. Antony leaves Europe with Cleo, where they begin a relationship. Mark has to return home to Rome as a coup begins to brew, much to Cleo's dismay. But back in Rome, Antony writes to Cleo and orders her to arm her ships, meeting him to help his fight. This is the climax of the film, the actual historic Battle of Actium. It's a battle lost by Antony and Cleopatra. They flee back to Alexandria, but Antony succumbs to the injuries sustained in the battle. Pharaoh then arrives and hands the grieving Cleopatra a snake she had carried with her before. She allows it to bite her, taking her own life, to die with the man she loved. Pretty dramatic, right? Yes, it was, but it was a success. The film had a budget of $500,000 and took home a box office of $1 million. A pretty big deal in these times. Cleopatra had the highest box office take of 1917. The next highest made under half of what Cleopatra made. Remember how we mentioned Bara's Cleopatra was not the first Cleopatra movie? Yeah, the film was so popular that Helen Garner Picture Players filmed additional scenes and re-released their version of a Cleopatra movie in 1918, attempting to compete and ride the coattails of the new Theda Bara Cleopatra film. This film also helped further Theda's popularity, something we will discuss later down. But Theda's popularity did bring some problems to the film. As we mentioned, there were some scenes and outfits where she was practically naked. This wouldn't fly with the film board, and some parts of Cleopatra were censored or outright cut from the movie. I'll read a few scenes that were forced to be cut. In Reel 1, 3 scenes of the Queen posing before Caesar with her navel exposed, ascending stairs to throne and suggestively leaning against him. Reel 2, Queen in objectable clothing turning as she embraces Caesar. Reel 4, close-up kissing scene between Queen and Pharaoh and Queen's actions following. Scene of Queen and Pharaoh before couch where she turns and exposes legs. 3 scenes of Queen in objectable costume before her and Pharaoh raise his knife. 2 close-ups of stabbing guard. All scenes of Queen coming downstairs. And there is so much more. But I think this gives a good look at the risky, provocative nature of the film, which ended up getting a lot of it cut out. Unfortunately, this was just the first step on the path to a complete and total loss of the film. But that's further down the line. Right now, we're celebrating! Fox made a ton of money off this movie. Theda Bara became even more popular, and film as a whole continued to change into an artistic media expression. As the new decade grew closer and closer, it seemed that Fox would be the dominant producer of movies in the world. But things can change in a few years, months, or maybe even days, and change was certainly around the corner. As we've alluded to a few times now, we cannot watch Cleopatra today. Only about a minute of footage exists, out of a total of 121 minutes. We can watch less than 1% of the film. How did this happen? Cleopatra is not a unique case. It is estimated that 75% of all silent era films are missing, with an estimated 90% of all films made prior to 1929 considered to be missing. There are a few specific reasons as to why Cleopatra itself is missing, but let's tackle some more broad reasons why silent films as a whole were not preserved. Let's begin with the very fact that no one cared about film preservation at this time. Executives thought, people have already seen this movie once, why would they ever want to watch it again? Plus, preserving these films took both space and materials that studios did not see the value in forking over. Keep in mind, this was way before the era of home releases. Speaking of the materials, let's discuss what film reels were made of. We'll begin with the canister itself. It's made of silver. So imagine you're a studio in the 1910s. Would you rather leave a bunch of silver sitting in a warehouse, collecting dust, going unused, or would you melt this silver down and resell it? I think you know what option was picked. If you're familiar with Georges Méliès, the French filmmaker, this is a big reason why his films are missing. During World War I, Méliès's studio was seized by the French army, and they saw a bunch of these canisters just sitting around, then deciding to melt them down for reuse in the war machine, destroying countless films in the process. Now we discuss the actual stuff in the film. The long string of frames that go inside the canister. They were both fragile and flammable, not things ideal for preservation. Over time, they would crumble to dust unless they were kept in perfect, ideal environments for preservation, which wasn't happening. There is one last broad reason why people didn't preserve silent films. It's because of sound films. In 1917, the same year Cleopatra came out, the first ever movie with sound also came out, The Jazz Singer, which blew audiences away. We get to watch a movie and hear the characters talk to us? Why would we ever want to watch another silent film? All of this combined leads us to that number from before. 75% of silent films, 90% of silent films made prior to 1929 are missing. Again, including Cleopatra. However, It's possible we could have kept a copy of Cleopatra, but there are more specific reasons as to why this film in particular was not preserved. It's not just Cleopatra we can no longer watch. Most of Theda Bara's career has been lost to time, for one massive reason. It was burned. As we mentioned, film stock was flammable, being made out of nitrocellulose. Nitrate fires are dangerous, as they provide their own sustainable oxygen, meaning once a fire starts, it's nearly impossible to put out. There were several dangerous nitrate fires at the turn of the century. The first major one took place in 1897, when a film projector caught fire at a carnival in Paris. Unfortunately, this caused the deaths of 126 people. Over in the States, on December 9th, 1914, Thomas Edison's laboratory caught fire, and it was destroyed. There were a ton of incidents like this across the world, and another one was about to take place. If you remember back in the beginning of the video, we mentioned Fort Lee, New Jersey. At that point, it was the center of film production in America. It declined over time as people began to move to Hollywood, but some facilities were left behind. One of these facilities was a brick storage building, which was the housing of silent films of Fox. Included in here was Cleopatra. The building was built with fireproofing in mind, but a sprinkler system was not built in, and I think you can see where this is going. One of the things that contributes to nitrate film decomposition is heat, and it just so happens that New Jersey was experiencing a nasty heat wave in July of 1937. Daytime temperatures were reaching 100 degrees, which was affecting the brick storage lot. Internal temperatures helped the nitrate films break down, leading to a dangerous buildup of flammable gas, which ignited. The films traveled through the entire lot, and the interior metal vaults soon became pressure cookers. As the heat and fire continued to build, the vaults swelled before they finally popped, exploding and destroying a lot of the brickwork. At some point after 2 in the morning, a local truck driver spotted the flames and called it in. The fire department arrived a half an hour later, of which the fire was now raging. It was spreading to nearby residential areas, destroying homes in its wake. It's here where Anna Greaves and her 2 sons, John and Charles, attempted to flee the fire. In their escape, they were caught in a flame. All 3 of them were burnt badly, and unfortunately, Charles would lose his life, the only fatality from the fire. Other local fire departments arrived to help battle the flame, and by the time it was over, it took the combined efforts of 150 men to put it out. The last flame was extinguished at 5:30 in the morning. All the film inside was destroyed. At the time, Fox didn't really care about this. All the films in the building were their old silent films. But obviously, us today in 2025 look back at this as a major loss of film history. Every Fox film made prior to 1932 was stored in here, and they were all lost. This means we lost most of Theda Bara's career, but also tons of other important films. Actor Tom Mix was another star of Fox, and his 85 films were exclusively stored here. J. Gordon Edwards, the director of Cleopatra, and other big-budget Fox pieces had his work stored here, and it too was lost. It wasn't just films from Fox stored here. Other companies stored their movies inside, and they too, of course, were lost. Overall, this was a big deal, and it wiped out a massive part of film history. And of course, it should be stated again, the last copy of Cleopatra in full was stored here. Years of work lost in hours. There is a bit of a happy ending to this story, however. At this point, in 1937, film preservation was in the conversation, and the Fox Studios fire brought discussion towards fire safety, so preventative measures were put in place to prevent this from happening again. The loss doesn't stop there. Or maybe we should say, it didn't start there. We already mentioned how Cleopatra was censored at its release. Cuts were forced to be made to the film, but a much larger censorship was on its way. the Motion Picture Production Code, more commonly referred to as the Hays Code. This was nicknamed after the president of the MPA, William Hays. In the 1920s, Hollywood was rocked by major controversies: murder, sexual assault, and this prompted religious groups to condemn the practice of film production, and politicians got to work. Just in 1921 alone, 100 bills were made, all with the purpose of censoring Hollywood. However, William Hays decided that self-censorship would be the way to prevent further legal censorship. So starting in 1927, he implemented a list of do's, don'ts, and maybes. This would be the beginning of the Hays Codes. Let's list a few. Don'ts: pointed profanity, including God, Lord, Jesus, hell, damn, and other expressions. Illegal trafficking of drugs, perversions, slavery of white people, childbirth, ridicule of religion, and cross-race marriage. These were some of the maybes. International friendships, arson, the use of guns, theft, torture, treason, cruelty to children and animals, and the use of drugs. This was the beginning of the Hays Codes, something that would be further developed and implemented in the 1930s. It also applied to films made prior to the 1930s, which again, of course, includes Cleopatra, meaning Cleopatra was a pre-code film and could no longer be shown to the public, again leading to its loss. But it's at this point in history where Theda Bara was basically forgotten by the masses, as the time between the film's release and the Fox fires saw massive developments for them both. Let's discuss them now. Cleopatra continued the successful career of Theda Bara. It was just 1 out of 7 films she starred in 1917. In 1918, she starred in 6 more, and in 1919, she starred in 7, with the last film of this year being The Lure of Ambition. Most of these roles were very similar to the roles she already played a dozen times over. A vamp, a femme fatale character. It's a sad truth to say, Theodosia was typecast. She was getting sick and tired of playing the same character over and over and over again. And on a handful of occasions, she was allowed to play a softer, more kind character. However, these films did not perform near as well, and they even earned her some additional controversy. In 1919's movie Kathleen Moravine, of which Bara plays the lead role, an Irish woman, the Irish-American community mocked her performance, deeming it to be laughable. And even the films that were performing well were paling in comparison to the highlights of her career. So again in 1919, she starred in a film called The Lure of Ambition, which became her last film with Fox Studios. This marked the end of her contract, one she did not renew. This wasn't solely due to the declining box office. There were some other real-world controversies surrounding Bara. Of course, there was the constant press coverage of her so-called satanic imagery, but something much more serious took place in 1918. A man named Guadalupe Martinez pushed his wife Rosa out of a window, and she lost her life. Guadalupe blamed Bara for this, claiming that his wife had watched her movies and developed vampiric tendencies, claiming that he pushed his wife out of the window for this very reason. Also, another man killed his mother-in-law and blamed his actions on Bara. He claimed that he felt crazy after watching her films and acted as such. These cases didn't go very far, but they did stir up more controversy for the actress. With this, her declining career, and a lack of a contract, Bara now decided to take a well-earned break. Bara went on a European cruise, confident that Hollywood would greet her return with open arms. This didn't happen. Studios were reluctant to take her back on, so instead, she returned to her roots, Broadway. Theda starred in a play called The Blue Flame. It debuted in 1920 and was quite successful, even if critics panned her acting as laughable. However, it wasn't all negative news for Bara, as the following year saw her getting married to Charles Brabham, another star of early Hollywood. The two actually met on the set of La Belle Ruse, as she was the star and he directed it. The two fell in love and were married on July 2nd, 1921. It's at this point where Brabham encouraged her to stop acting. Now that she was married, he didn't want his wife out gallivanting in see-through costumes. Despite this, Bara did manage to land 3 more movie roles. 1 in 1925 and 2 in 1926. Her last ever film role being 45 Minutes from Hollywood, of which she mocked her vampire character. And that was it. Bara fully retired after this film. In 1936, she appeared in a radio program where she did mention returning to film.
I understand, Miss Bara, you're going to make some radio appearances.
Yes, I am. And I'm also going to do some motion picture work.
Oh, that's good news.
A return that never came. Finally, in 1949, at age 65, plans to make a biopic of her life began. Bara knew a young girl from her neighborhood who she thought would be great to play her for the movie. She brought her to her personal home, intending to show off her film collection so that the young actress could have an idea of how Bara acted on the screen. But when Theda opened her old film canisters, she was met with terror. They had disintegrated completely. Her own personal collection of film prints was gone. Another reason why we can't watch most of her performances today. Plans for her biopic fell through afterwards. The next 6 years saw Bara and Brabin living together peacefully, when her life would unfortunately soon come to an end. After a lengthy battle with stomach cancer, she spent her final days at the California Lutheran Hospital in Los Angeles. In her final days, she was surrounded by her family, including her husband, mother, and younger sister, before Bara would unfortunately pass away on April 7th, 1955. It's a sad fact to say, but we can only discuss Theda Bara's career. We cannot see most of it. She starred in 43 films across her career. Out of this, only 5 of them are preserved in full. Only 2 of them are partially found, one of which being Cleopatra, and the other 36 movies are completely gone, no trace of them, outside of stills and promotional material. The 5 films that survive in full include her last film, 45 Minutes from Hollywood, Madam Mystery, East Lynne, A Fool There Was, and The Stain. If you remember, The Stain was Bara's first ever film role, and A Fool There Was her first major role. So we have her first and final appearances saved today. Besides Cleopatra, the other film that's partially found is Salome, where Bara plays a character similar in appearance to Cleopatra, which has led to confusion regarding found footage of both films. Okay, with this out of the way, let's discuss what we have from Cleopatra. In total, we have 57 seconds of footage, which is just 0.76% of the entire film. We don't even have 1% of the movie. But this number, believe it or not, used to be smaller. Let's discuss the finds. For a long time, we only had 20 seconds of footage from the film. A brief scene where Theda walks across the screen, and that was it. Such a massive production, so much time, effort, and money reduced to a walk cycle. Luckily, this is what we had, it's not what we have. In September of 2023, researcher and fellow YouTuber James Fennell was lucky enough to recover more footage. He noticed a listing on eBay for a toy projector, which included some nitrate reels. Upon playing them back, James made an amazing discovery. This was more footage of Cleopatra. It was also 4 times as long, and it gives us a better look at the movie, including Mark Antony, a marching army, and some looks at the Egyptian set built for the film. While it gives us an additional 40 seconds of film, combining with the previous 10, it is still under a minute of footage out of the 121 that made up the entire movie. Again, under 1% of it. But let's stop and think about that for a second. Up until 2 years ago, we had 10 seconds of footage, and people believed this was the only thing still surviving from the movie. Then one day in 2023, we quadrupled what we had. Just because someone purchased a film reel off of eBay, I think this is inspiring. And it leads to hopes that more footage will be found one day. Like we've said so many times already, so many silent films are missing for X, Y, and Z reasons. But this list used to be a lot larger. Sometimes, entire silent films are found in the weirdest places. A Trip to the Moon, George Méliès's most popular film, was considered partially lost for a while, until two film collectors found partial copies that made up a full copy. Metropolis, a silent film from 1927, was gone, up until a copy was found in a basement in Argentina. Even as recent as 2010, entire silent movies were found. When cleaning out a barn in New Hampshire, a contractor found a film projector alongside 6 reels. They were donated to a museum, and upon playback, it was discovered that a movie called When Lincoln Paid was a part of the collection. A film not preserved. Lost for 97 years, found in one day. So it's not the end for Cleopatra. I hold out hope that more of this film and other lost silent films are out there somewhere. Lost in a basement, a barn, behind drywall, in a safe, under a mattress, anywhere where stuff can be hidden. I have faith that more of Cleopatra will be found one day. It's not just the footage of Cleopatra we have left today. The influence from both the movie and Bara are still felt. In an era where celebrities are flaunted and shown in the press at every step of their life, Bara was the first one to do it. She pushed the boundaries of a budding industry, and she has certainly received her posthumous flowers. Starting in 1960, she was recognized for her contributions to film, as she was given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. When the Chicago International Film Festival was founded in 1964, the logo was made up of 3 composite eyes from famed silent film stars, including Theda Bara. In 2006, a road in Fort Lee, New Jersey was renamed to Theda Bara Way. Also, if you're familiar with the Lumineers song Cleopatra, she is the cover image for the album. And the actual song Cleopatra on the album Cleopatra is partially based off of Theda Bara's life. And here we are today discussing her, nearly 100 years after she's passed away. She's found a new set of fans who are interested in lost media and film preservation, including me. This video originally started off with just a discussion of the Cleopatra movie, but when I read more about her life, I decided I've got to tell her story to whoever will listen, and that includes you. Thank you all so much for watching this video. It took a lot of time to make, so I'll appreciate any support you can give it. If you like this style of video, for sure drop a like and let me know. There are tons of films similar to Cleopatra that I'd love to do a deep dive on. Greed, Metropolis, London After Midnight. All these major films of the silent era that are missing or were missing. While you're at it, why not subscribe for more of this content? I'm almost at 50k and I'd love to hit it by the end of the year. Thank you all so much for the support I've gotten on my channel. It means the world that I get to yap about something I'm interested in for an hour or so, and I've got people willing to listen to me. I hope you all have a wonderful day.